On today's show, we are joined by the U.S. Constitution coach, Rick Green, who joins us to share about why you must wake up to the fact that your First, Second, and Fifth Amendment constitutional rights are being violated right now, and what to do about it.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
Yes, and yes! Thrive Nation, welcome back to another exciting edition of the Thrive Time Show on your radio and podcast download. Josh Wilson, how are you, sir?
I am very well. Thank you, Mr. Clark. How are you?
Brother, I am excited to have you on the show today, and I know that you at Living Water Irrigation, you are having a great year. You're having a great month. Things are explain your growth this year versus last year. Are you up about 10% or 15%?
So year to date at this very minute, well, as of Friday, so I don't know as of today, but as of Friday, we're up 38% year over year.
And a lot of our listeners on the other side of things, they are in a really tough spot right now because their business has been deemed to be non-essential. And it's not good. It's not, and we deeply empathize with you. But I want any of the listeners out there who are unaware of what's going on or how this coronavirus government. It's an overreaction to the pandemic. The government has seized many of our rights. And today's guest we're going to have with us is going to talk about your constitutional rights. But just a quick timeline here. Josh, I'm sure you remember this about 4 months ago, hearing about these doomsday predictions.
Yes, sir.
From Neil Ferguson, where he said that 2.2 million Americans might die.
Might die.
He said that they might die. Next thing you know, everybody's worried. Fear sets in. Step 2, ugly truth. We interview people like Lindsay Blankenship, a PA at a hospital, doctors, nurses. They said that the guidelines on the forms when someone comes into the hospital with flu-like symptoms, they're supposed to, anybody who has a cough or a fever, they're supposed to diagnose them as COVID-like, thus inflating the number of cases. So the number of predicted deaths was inflated by Neil Ferguson's false models. The number of cases was falsely inflated to match the false models, and now the government's having a grab. They're grabbing at your freedoms. They're
Yes,
having
sir.
a grab festival. They're taking away your right to peaceably assemble. They're taking away, in many states, your right to bear arms. They're taking away your right to go to church. They're taking away your right to send your kids to school. They're taking away your rights to be open for business. And so I thought, let's have a guy on the show today who can speak with great clarity about the United States Constitution and the rights that we all have. And so without any further ado, Rick Green, welcome onto the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
Man, I'm glad to be here. I never thought I would have man cave envy, but I am feeling it right now, bro. This place is amazing.
Well, I'll let Andrew kind of do a kind of a panoramic view. He can kind of explore the man cave while I am asking you a few questions here. You are a Constitution coach. And for a lot of listeners, including myself, previous to knowing you, I've never heard of such a thing. What is a Constitution coach?
Well, as you know well, you need a coach in business. You need a coach in your health. We have people that coach us in just about everything. We need a coach in freedom right now. And so we are training people to go out and coach their friends and family, their neighbors, people in their church, wherever they can get people together, coach them in constitutional rights, teach them the Constitution.
You and I met for the first time in person at the Trump Hotel in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I would say, and maybe you would disagree with me, I would just say about 40% of the people on the street in Chicago appear to be adhering to the mask-wearing rules.
Yes, even if they were walking their dog by themselves and no one within 100 feet, I had to chuckle every time I saw that, but yeah.
So even though Dr. Jim Meehan has pointed out there is no medical reason to wear a mask, and even though you will point out on today's show there's no constitutional basis for all of these freedoms being stripped away, and there's no scientific evidence because the models are incorrect, government is reaching into our lives as never before since the Constitution was created and is stripping America of our basic freedoms. So I'd like for you to share, sir, what freedoms are you seeing from your perspective, being taken from Americans, and how scared should we be? How worried should we be about this?
There are so many parts of the Constitution. In fact, it's hard to find a part of the Constitution left unscathed by these orders across the country. I mean, we've seen it with freedom of religion. We've seen it with freedom of speech, to assemble, to petition our government, to protest, to travel, even Second Amendment rights. We're looking at all kinds of due process rights being violated. Fifth Amendment takings clause. I mean, you name it. It's across the board. And as you said, it's something we never thought we would see, even once or twice, even in places like California or Massachusetts where you might expect it, but instead we're seeing it across the country, even in my home state of Texas.
Now, I have a terrible short-term memory and a terrible long-term memory. So when you're firing off, hey,
is there any part of your memory that's good?
No, it's just the middle area.
Okay, all right,
it's that
gotcha.
middle area, Josh.
So right now works.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Right now.
Right now. I'm pretty good with right now.
Right now.
But
Let's-
5 minutes from now.
Let's
we're
talk
going.
about the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah.
How is the Fifth Amendment being violated, and what is the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution all about?
We typically think of it as I plead the Fifth, right? I don't want to answer that question, so I'm going to plead the Fifth. It's the last part of the Fifth Amendment that is the most important to me, and that is our property rights, that you cannot have your property taken from you without just compensation from government. And right now, virtually every business owner in the country is having their property taken from them little by little the longer the lockdowns continue. The longer we have these COVID crackdowns, you're destroying these lives, which you've talked about over and over again, and that is a taking. Government has taken your business from you and destroyed it. That's why I see the CARES Act as paying damages, not even close to what the actual damages are, but it's an attempt to somehow do that. That's why I've actually encouraged conservatives that would normally say no help from the government, that, look, you're getting the damages that you deserve to some extent for what the government's actually done to you.
The Fifth Amendment, it says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment of an indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval services or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of the law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. How has our private property been taken without our consent? How is that happening for people out there who maybe live in a state that's more open?
Sure, and in some areas it's more a threat on the front end. So, you know, we were both in Chicago this weekend at a church where they had been threatened by the mayor of Chicago with this term I'd never even heard of, summary abatement, which apparently means they can come in and destroy the church without any due process. That would obviously be taking their property. But even by threat and preventing them from being able to use their property, you can argue that they've taken their property. Of course, I've argued for a long time the Endangered Species Act is a taking of your property. Even though they don't take the title to the property, they prevent you from being able to use it to its greatest economic use. And so in the same way, if I threaten you as a business, hey, you can't open, or you can only open with 25% capacity, I'm taking your property to some extent, maybe 75% of your property that time. I'm preventing you from being able to use it, and certainly zero due process here. So when we talk about denying a citizen life, liberty, and property without due process, zero evidence that your business has had any cases of COVID, anybody with the virus in there, that there's been any spreading of the zero evidence, all on conjecture, all on theory. And thankfully, some judges are already handing down decisions saying there's no evidence here, that you cannot take people's property or prevent people from opening based on a theory.
Josh, you're just trying to run a company.
Yes, sir.
On a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is the most political person in the world, somebody who wakes up every day and goes to CNN, goes to Fox, hops on Rush Limbaugh, gets into a debate, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is the most politically active person in the world, and 1 is a person who generally could care less, how would you rate your overall political involvement previous to this COVID-19 craziness?
I'd say a good solid 3 or 4. Like, for sheer transparency, Rick bringing up that second part of the Fifth Amendment, never knew it existed. I'm just going to be completely honest. And I think there's a lot of listeners out there and a lot of business owners. I mean, I get to fortunately hang out with a lot of intelligent people quite often, present company included. And I never knew the second part of the Fifth Amendment.
And it's
there.
actually the last part.
Yeah,
you probably
or the last part, excuse me.
You
Yeah.
heard of due process.
Oh,
right?
absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
you'd heard
I
of
plead the
double
Fifth. I plead the Fifth, yeah.
Yeah, and you heard of double jeopardy.
Right.
You'd heard of grand jury. you'd heard of all those things. It's that very last part that is so important. But you're right. Most people, I do that in Constitution classes all over the country, and I'll stand there and ask people that, and almost no one knows about that part of the Fifth Amendment.
Absolutely fascinating. And
So-
what the government has done to us over these last, I guess going on 4 months, and pretty close.
Yeah, now let me talk about this for a second. I want to make sure the listeners get this because I want everyone to put this word picture in your mind. HUG, okay? H. All the fear started with hugely inflated predictions about the models. The models. We kept talking about the models. Dr. Deborah Birx was interviewed. She was on the White House at the White House press conference, and she's talking about the models that came out of the UK. Again, these models that predicted that 2.2 million Americans might die. I'm going to play the audio clip for the listeners out there because some people might not have heard the most recent updates from her. But again, Neil Ferguson initially predicted that 2.2 million people would die from the coronavirus, COVID-19, and this is what Deborah Birx has to say about it. Here we go.
I'm sure many of you saw the recent report out of the UK about them adjusting completely their needs. This is really quite important. If you remember, that was the report that said there would be 500,000 deaths in the UK and 2.2 million deaths in the United States. They've adjusted that number in the UK to 20,000. So 500,000 to 20,000. We're looking into this in great detail to understand.
Now again, Neil Ferguson, he predicted 2.2 million American deaths. Now they've adjusted that. They said he's off by 25 times, which means America is now on pace to lose a total of 88,000 to 110,000 from the COVID-19. Now, somebody out there watching right now says, we've already lost more than 88,000. Yes, but think about the U. The U, again, H is hugely inflated models, but U is the ugly truth. The actual number of cases and deaths have been inflated through misattribution. All right? And then G, the only solution we could possibly have to these hugely inflated models and this ugly truth about the COVID-19 cases being inflated and the deaths being inflated is to take away your freedom. So you just mentioned, Rick, how we're losing our Fifth Amendment rights. Let's talk about our First Amendment. Yeah. What is our First Amendment for the listeners out there that are not familiar with the United States Constitution's First Amendment?
I was saying a few weeks ago that 4 of the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment have been violated by all these COVID crackdowns, which is your freedom of religion, so we're stopping churches from meeting, your freedom of speech, so you can't protest and go show up or even speak from the pulpit, your freedom of assembly, whether that be at your church or your local club or whatever, nobody can get together, and your freedom to petition your government for redress of grievance. And I had been skipping freedom of the press and saying, that hasn't been violated, because they're on the side of the fear tactics. But in reality, if you think of yourself as the press, Clay, and think of my radio program as the press, or even our posts on Facebook, or even these YouTube clips that are being taken down, in reality, some portion of our freedom of the press has been violated as well. But even if you take that one off the table, 4 out of the 5 absolutely violated on a daily basis. And these dictators in these states are doubling down, even with the numbers that you just described, even with what you've shown people with the false narrative and the fear-mongering and the numbers. They refuse to pivot. They refuse to come back. Now, thankfully, the president is putting the pressure on them to say at least open the churches, and even Newsom is now saying they will, but of course with the micromanaging of you can sit with your family but not within 2 pews of anybody else. They're going to literally essentially give churches the measurements for how they're going to have to sit in their church. It's ridiculous, and that's unconstitutional too. They cannot tell you how you're going to worship, how you do communion. They're literally laying that out in California, how you can do communion. It's ridiculous.
Now, what amendment, for the listeners out there that don't know, what amendment gives us the freedom of the press? What amendment is that?
First Amendment.
The First Amendment, okay? So everybody out there, if you're not familiar with these amendments, I'm putting them all on the show notes, okay? So the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
But you skipped the last part.
Yes, sir.
There's a semicolon there, and then it says, unless there's a virus that 1/10% might not survive, therefore the other 99.9% may not use any of these freedoms. It's got that in there.
I blacked out.
Yeah, you did. You skipped that.
Now, I want to make sure the listeners know this because this is so big. This is why we're having a constitutional coach on today's show, is these rights are being taken from you, and the justification that's being used is, this virus is so dangerous. However, listen to this, folks. Listen to this. Again, they shouldn't be able to take away your rights from you even if it was dangerous. But think about this. CNN just reported. Now, this is not from Fox. This is CNN, May 22nd. They are now reporting, this is CNN, folks. I got the excerpt here for you. They're reporting that the Center for Disease Control now knows that, to their best estimate, less than 0.4% of the people who have COVID-19 will die. Less than 0.4. So that means if 100 of us got it, that would be less than one of us has the potential to die. And that's based off of the people that are reporting it, or who are being officially diagnosed as having it. And then we say every day on the news, CNN says this every day, MSNBC says this every day. They say, but the number of cases is so high. We have more cases than anyone in the world. Rick, if we are doing more tests than any other country in the world, why would we have more cases than any other country in the world?
Seems like we might find more of those folks with the asymptomatic coronavirus as well. But I got to go back to something you said, because I can't help think about this, Clay, because you said even if the numbers were off the chart, right? I mean, let's say
they were.
Let's say it's Spanish flu.
Yep.
25 times more deadly than what we're dealing with right now, right? Okay, 2.5% case fatality rate. Even then, 1918, we did not shelter people in their home for months at a time. We did not shut down the economy. We did not say to any healthy people, do not go to work. We did none of the things we're doing right now. And the media lies that have tried to, they show the images of the cots in the big room from 1918, the black and white pictures, and everybody's wearing masks, and they make you think that all of the things the government's doing now, we did in 1918. Absolute lie. It did not happen. At the most, we closed down, some of the big public gatherings in some cities. Yes, they asked, San Francisco and Tucson and a few others said you got to wear a mask if you're in certain places. We modified public transportation, and we asked businesses to open at different hours in order to not have such crowded public, some little things like that. But almost all of it was suggestions. Please do this, not mandated. Certainly not from a state level, and not at all from a federal level. The president didn't even mention Spanish flu. Now, that was 25 times more deadly, Clay, and we still protected your civil liberties, protected your Constitution while battling the virus. Same thing with smallpox, 300 times more deadly than what we're dealing with, 30% case fatality rate. We have never done this. This is an unprecedented time, and I'm so glad people are asking the right questions. I mean, Josh, you're not the only one that's suddenly interested in some of these areas of the Constitution that you may not have paid attention to before. Clay, when we were there yesterday, I don't know about you, but I mean, one of the things that stood out to me was at least half the people in that crowd are people that have probably never thought about their constitutional rights before. And yet they're thinking about it, they're talking about it, they're asking about it. So I'm hoping there's an awakening for civic literacy right now to say, I want to protect my rights, but I got to know them first.
Please educate me about this. I believe that I understand it. Understand this, but I want to make sure I understand it on according to the Constitution, Coach. Here, we as Americans, the founding fathers believed that we derived our rights, our inherent rights, from the Creator, aka from God. We believe that we get those rights from God, and the Constitution simply upholds those rights. Am I correct, or am I wrong? Tell me about this.
100% right. Sometimes we have this misperception that the Bill of Rights, this was the founding fathers giving you a right to self-defense in the Second Amendment, or giving you the right to speech. Not at all. They said in the Declaration, that's where we get the philosophy. It is literally the foundation. John Quincy Adams described it as the foundation that the home of the Constitution is built upon. And in the Declaration, we get that philosophy. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, here's the whole reason we have government, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So government is not supposed to do anything that we the people have not given it the consent to do, and the reason we even give it the consent to do anything is to protect the rights, as you just said, that God gave us. Government doesn't give you rights. In fact, Ronald Reagan made the observation years ago. He said, I studied the Russian Constitution, the American Constitution, and they both talk about freedom of religion. The difference is, in the Soviet Union, your freedom of religion is granted to you from the government when it wants to, and in the American system, it comes from God, and government's job is to protect it, not violate it like we're doing now.
So when Mayor Lightfoot from Chicago says that she's going to fine every single person that went to church last week in Chicago, every single person, I would call that perverse, because one, she's going to have to track everyone that went to church.
Right.
Which, by the way, that's what Adolf Hitler did. He said, hey, if you're Jewish and you want to keep practicing your faith, that's fine. We'll just put a little gold star on you.
That's all I could think about when the Kentucky governor said, write down those license plates, and you contact those people and tell them they're quarantined in their home, and they got to take their temperature at the same time every day, and we are following you and monitoring you. I asked the attorney that was defending that church, Matt Staver. I said, did they hand out the gold badges at the same time? I mean, they're literally harassing these Christians for showing up at church and worshiping.
Anytime that somebody compares what's going on in America with what happened in Adolf Hitler, people then, as it relates to what happened to Adolf Hitler, anytime you draw a connection between the parallels between what's happening now and what Adolf Hitler did, you're labeled as an extremist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
However, I want to make sure listeners get this. Adolf Hitler, I don't like him, but he was a smart guy, and he realized that the way to strip people of their freedoms is to scare them and to kill them one paper cut at a time.
Yeah.
He did not just come out there one day and said, hey, let's put all of the Jewish people in railroad cars and take them off to their certain death. He used the hype and the panic related to the flu to scare people, to concentrate the Jewish people into quarantine camps to never return.
And part of what, by not knowing our history, we don't realize how much early 1930s Germany was like we are. I mean, this was not some backwater. This was a culturally literate, free society. If it can happen there, it can happen here. And that is not an exaggeration. We are foolish to think that because we have had an incredible 243-year run since the Declaration of Independence, that freedom will always exist in America. It's not true. Human nature does not lean towards liberty. It typically leans towards tyranny. We have liberty, and then it's an exception in history. Most people who ever lived on the planet didn't have anywhere close to what we have today.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cue a little audio clip up. This is from Ted Cruz, the U.S. Senator.
My man.
And Ted Cruz is explaining how your First Amendment rights, the freedom of the press, are being stripped from you, but you don't even know it. So bear with me for a second. And, Rick, I'm going to play this for you, and maybe you can kind of take some notes and break it down for guys like Josh and I. I'm going to hit play on it. I'd just like to get your take on this. This is Ted Cruz during a Judiciary Subcommittee. Here, let me hit play. Here we go.
As I understand your background, you're not a Republican and nor are you a conservative. Is that accurate?
That would be an understatement.
And indeed, you're the former editor-in-chief of...
Now, Ted Cruz is interviewing a gentleman who is not a Republican.
Not a Republican and nor are you a conservative. Is that accurate?
That would be an understatement.
So he's interviewing Dr. Robert Epstein. Again, he's interviewing Dr. Robert Epstein.
Indeed, you're the former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today.
Correct.
So you're a respected academic. You testified before this committee that Google's manipulation of votes gave at least 2.6 million additional votes to Hillary Clinton in the year 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I want to make sure I understand. You personally supported and voted for Hillary Clinton.
I was a very strong public supporter of Hillary Clinton, yes.
So you're not dismayed that people voted for her, but your testimony is that Google is, through bias in search results, manipulating voters in a way they're not aware of.
On a massive scale. And what I'm saying is that I believe in democracy. I believe in the free and fair election more than I have any kind of allegiance to a candidate or a party.
And looking forward, if I understood your testimony correctly, you said in subsequent elections, Google and Facebook and Twitter and big text manipulation could manipulate as many as 15 million votes in a subsequent election?
In 2020, if all these companies are supporting the same candidate, there are 15 million votes on the line that can be shifted without people's knowledge and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace.
Now, you described the Go Vote reminder, and you said it wasn't a public service announcement, but rather manipulation. Can you explain how? I'm not sure everyone followed the details of that.
Well, sure. If on Election Day in 2016, if Mark Zuckerberg, for example, had chosen to send out a Go Vote reminder, say just to Democrats, and no one would have known if he had done this, that would have given that day an additional at least 450,000 votes to Democrats. And we know this without doubt because of Facebook's own published data, because they did an experiment that they didn't tell anyone about during the 2010 election. They published it in 2012, it had 60 million Facebook users involved. They sent out a Go Vote reminder, and they got something like 360,000 more people to get off their sofas and go vote who otherwise would have stayed home. The point is, I don't think that Mr. Zuckerberg sent out that reminder in 2016. I think he was overconfident. I think Google was overconfident. All these companies were. I don't think he sent that out. Without monitoring systems in place, we'll never know what these companies are doing. But the point is, in 2018, I'm sure they were more aggressive. We have lots of data to support that. And in 2020, you can bet that all of these companies are going to go all out. And the methods that they're using are invisible. They're subliminal. They're more powerful than most any effects I've ever seen in the behavioral sciences. And I've been in the behavioral sciences for almost 40 years.
You know, our Democratic colleagues on this committee often talk about what they view as the pernicious effect of big money and big corporate dollars. What you are testifying to is that a handful of Silicon Valley billionaires and giant corporations are able to spend millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars collectively, massively influencing the results of elections. And there's no accountability. You said, we don't know. We have no way of knowing if Google or Facebook or Twitter sends its Democrats or Republicans or how they bias it, because it's a black box with no transparency or accountability whatsoever. Am I understanding you correctly?
Senator, with respect, I must correct you.
Please.
If Mark Zuckerberg chooses to send out a Go Vote reminder just to Democrats on Election Day, that doesn't cost him a dime.
Fair enough. Do you happen to know who the Hillary Clinton campaign's #1 financial supporter was in the year 2016?
I think I do, but please remind me.
The #1 financial supporter of the Hillary Clinton campaign in the 2016 election was the parent company of Google, Alphabet, who was our first witness. They were her #1 financial donor, and your testimony is, through their deceptive search methods, they moved 2.6 million votes in her direction. I would think anybody, whether or not you favor one candidate or another, should be deeply dismayed about a handful of Silicon Valley billionaires having that much power over our elections to silently and deceptively shift vote outcomes.
Now, I want to get your take on this, Rick, because the argument that's being made by a lot of people right now is they say, look, Google's a privately held company. Facebook's a privately held company. And therefore they can say what they want to say. What would be your take to that? 'Cause I know that most people, Josh, our age and younger, whenever they want facts, they Google it.
Yes, sir.
Don't they?
I agree.
So, but I think people now have been, Google's almost like the news for most people.
Yeah.
You know, it's the news for most people. So I have found that most people perceive whatever comes up top in a Google search result is true. And Rick, though, Twitter is censoring President Trump's own tweets. They actually took down a President Trump tweet related to endorsing and encouraging Michelle Malkin to continue. She's an Asian political activist, and he decided to go ahead and encourage her to keep sharing the truth and to speak out against censorship. But they took down the president's tweets. Could you talk to me about this and how you see this as being very, very dangerous if this becomes the new norm?
I have such an unrelenting faith in the free market and in what Adam Smith called the invisible hand that is very hard for me to get behind any government intervention in a quote-unquote private business. And so early to this fight and this game, even when I was being blocked and banned and whatnot on Facebook, I had a hard time thinking about how government could intervene in this private business. And it's actually Senator Cruz that you just showed and his investigations over the last 3 or 4 years that changed my mind on that. I didn't realize how much protection these guys get, how much they get government favors and all of those different things. And I think that does open the door, not just the fact that it is the place that most people get their news, but the fact that they do get government protection for supposedly being neutral and then not being neutral. I think absolutely we now need to be intervening in the way that Senator Cruz has been pushing for now. For really, he's been on this crusade for probably 4 or 5 years at this point, trying to bring some accountability to these guys. And the biggest fear for me is, just like we're facing right now, people are not getting truth. When you take down the doctors that are on the front lines of this whole COVID crackdown situation
True.
that are trying to bring some rationale and reason to the discussion, and you start blocking them. I mean, my kids have a crazy, funny little TikTok video that they made about being on lockdown and quarantine and all that. And because it's, over 1 million views, even TikTok has gone in and put a banner on it for truth about COVID-19. Click here. That takes you to the World Health Organization. I mean, it's crazy how far we're going with this. So, yeah, I think there is a time now for government to intervene in order to protect our freedom of the press.
Hey, Rick, let me ask you this. So to be very apolitical here, not right or left or whatever, just like I mentioned to you about that last part of the Fifth Amendment, what do you feel, because obviously you experience it daily and deal with it, why are we so willingly giving up our rights? Yeah. Why are we so willingly laying down and just accepting? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it lack of education? Is it what do you feel is going on, Rick?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
No, please.
No, I think it's a combination of really well played out fear, and then just ignorance. And I don't mean ignorance as an insult. I'm ignorant about many things, right? But civic ignorance, and Tom Jipping says ignorance is curable. And I think that's absolutely accurate. When 3/4 of Americans can't name the 3 branches of government, when half of Americans can't name even one freedom out of the First Amendment. We went over 5 of them earlier, right? And I used to couldn't name the freedoms out of the First Amendment. That's actually what my wake-up call was. I'm sitting in my own Capitol office when I was a legislator, and I'm complaining about the fact that Texans couldn't name the 5 freedoms out of the First Amendment. And then I tried to name them. I couldn't even get close. And I was like, oh, my gosh, I'm a legislator, I'm a lawyer, I'm a political junkie, I live this stuff, and I can't name them. That's when I started teaching the Constitution, started studying it more myself, and started teaching it. So I think the ignorance part of it is, think about it. I grew up on Schoolhouse Rock. Saturday morning, I'm learning how a bill becomes a law, right? We need some of that basic stuff right now because we're letting one person in each state make law. They're making this up on their own. They're writing law as governors. Mayors are writing law and enforcing that law. And here we are 2.5 months into that kind of tyranny with no legislative input. No checks and balances. So just the basic idea of separation of powers and checks and balances, the ideas that made our nation great, the ideas that the Founding Fathers, when they gathered in Independence Hall, they took all these ideas that they were reading in Montesquieu and reading in the Bible and reading in Locke, and they put it together and created this incredible system. And we have forgotten those very basics. So that's what I'm hoping there's a wake-up call right now. The reason we're doing ConstitutionCoach.com is to give people a chance that have never thought about this to just go watch a few videos. They're not going to put you to sleep. They're entertaining, but you can learn about the Constitution and get your friends and family to do the same. You cannot defend and assert your rights if you don't know your rights.
So to follow up on that, would you encourage, so for our listeners out there, obviously we have a pretty diverse listenership, but there are a bunch of right-wing and a bunch of business owners. But do you feel, so if somebody just come across this, what would you encourage? Is education, is going and watching some videos, is like what I realized a few minutes ago about what is the last part of the Fifth Amendment? Do you believe that's the place to start to open up people's?
Yeah, I really do think that it almost always starts with us. We love to blame others, right? Just like I just got through blaming the governors. But really, the real problem, the real pandemic, is not the virus, and it's not even these petty tyrants. The real pandemic is that loss of civic knowledge that's been festering underneath the surface for decades, and now we're seeing the result of it. So if that's the real pandemic, if the real problem is civic ignorance that got us into this, then civic literacy can not only get us out of it, prevent it from happening in the future. And it's interesting you say that about the different types of listeners, because what's interesting about when you look at the Bill of Rights, most Americans agree on this stuff. I don't care if you're right, left, if you're Republican, Democrat, Daffy Duck Party, I don't care. Whatever your political persuasion. You want freedom of speech for your kids. You want freedom of religion or to have no religion at all for yourself. You want to have all of these things. The only thing that's, that maybe some on the left would not join us on is the right of self-defense, right, which the founder said was the first law of nature. But let's not go there. I could talk about that one all day. But when you talk about due process and you don't want soldiers quartered in your home and all these things in the Bill of Rights, I don't care if you're left or right or what, you need to know these things. And our first Chief Justice was John Jay. He was first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, signer of the Constitution, helped frame it. He was one of the guys that gave us the Federalist Papers. That's kind of our instruction manual on the Constitution. Here's the thing he said that really fits for us today. He said, every citizen ought to read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. By knowing our rights, we'll sooner perceive when they're violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. We didn't know our rights 2 months ago. They were being violated over and over and over again. And we started to say in our gut, this just doesn't feel right. Something's wrong here. But if we knew our rights, we would have perceived that sooner, and we would have properly defended and asserted them. We're starting to do that, right? We're winning lawsuits across the country. Wisconsin, we got their order thrown out. Churches are starting to be able to meet again. We're winning suit after suit after suit, and thankfully, we've got some of the best attorneys on the planet that are representing people for free, and we'll connect you with them if you need them. That's all at ConstitutionCoach.com. But the whole point is, you got to know your rights before you can defend and assert them. So I'm asking not just conservatives, I'm saying liberals. Now, left-wingers, that's a religion for them, right? But liberals are typically are intellectually honest with you and will actually think this stuff through. People in the middle that have never thought about this, that's our real target. Those are the people that we want so bad to get passionate about freedom and become students of freedom.
What is your website?
ConstitutionCoach.com.
ConstitutionCoach.com. How do you get paid? How do you make any money with this?
Donors. We're giving this all away for free, so it's people that donate at our website. We coach people for free. We give the classes away for free. And when I say coach, we try. What we want is we've got about 1,000 Constitution coaches right now, and they host classes online with Zoom. They do them in their churches, in their living room, wherever. And so we teach them how to do that. We give them all the tools that they need. Our goal is to have 20,000 coaches across the country that are teaching their friends and family, and to get 3 or 4 million people to go through these Constitution classes. We think that will be the magic number to restore the constitutional republic. In the founding era, it was only about 3% that actually got involved, and that's what we need today.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to give the listeners some action steps they can take here.
Awesome.
And as I go through these action steps, I'd like if you could share with me or share with the listeners why you believe that these action steps make sense, and maybe you don't believe they make sense. Maybe you say I don't agree with that. Maybe we need to debate it a little bit. But I'm going to go through some action steps that people can take, because I feel like once you know what's happening, I don't want you to end today's show by saying, "Oh, that's great. I know this information, but now I can't do anything." So I want to give the listeners action steps they can take. So the first one, Josh, I'd go to peaceablygather.com today, and I would register. And I would register that you are going to take your family to church this week,
and send it to your pastor.
I would do it.
Yeah.
Today I would register that you are going to church, and I would encourage your pastor to reopen the church right now. Now, Pastor Brian Gibson and Matthew Faraci and so many people are behind this, getting it out there, getting the word out there. I helped kind of connect Pastor Brian and Matthew Faraci, and we're getting very aggressive on this. Fox News has featured Pastor Brian. Huckabee's featured Pastor Brian. Fox and Friends has featured Pastor Brian. The One America News Network has featured Pastor Brian. The Blaze has featured me. But I encourage you to go to peaceablygather.com and register that you are, in fact, going to church this weekend, even if you don't believe in God. And I would encourage you to push your pastor to do so. And so far, we have over 5,000 pastors that have opened their churches from coast to coast. Over 2.5 million church attendees in California alone who have broke these fake injunctions, who have broken through these false rules have been instituted by governors. Why is that so powerful, Rick, for everybody to go to church, especially in a state like California, where you have 2.5 million people now violating Governor Newsom's ridiculous violation of your First Amendment rights? Why is it so important for people to get out there and attend church and to defy the governor's false rules and injunctions?
I'm convinced at this point that these petty tyrants are not going to back off without some civil disobedience, some proper, peaceful civil disobedience. It's what we did in Texas whenever Shelley Luther opened up her salon and was willing to go to jail for it. We rallied around her with peaceful protests, got her good legal counsel, and the Texas Supreme Court set her free, and our governor was forced to back off. Same thing's going to happen across the country. If you go to church, you're standing up peaceably saying, I'm not going to have the Constitution go to sleep during this pandemic, and I'm going to be a citizen that stands for it.
But if you violate these false, non-constitutional rules, it will then force the federal government, the Department of Justice, to get involved, if I'm correct.
That's what we're hoping for. And what, I always tell people, look, if you're going to do civil disobedience, you got to weigh the cost. You may get fined. You may go to jail. You may lose a license for your restaurant or whatever it might be that you're opened up. But we need people to weigh that cost and be willing to do it, just like MLK did in the civil rights movement. He was willing to sit in that Birmingham jail. He was willing to make the sacrifice, and he literally changed the world as a result. Shelley Luther changed the entire state of Texas because she stood up. And people in California can do the same thing. Oregon, Washington, all of these states. I mean, there's been very few, Clay, as you know well. I mean, I always mention Kristi Noem in all these interviews because she's been a rock star in South Dakota. She's the only governor I know of that really did this right. DeSantis did pretty darn good in Florida too. But man, I just it takes the citizens at this point. Newsom and those folks like that, they are not going to change their mind. With politicians will not see the light until they feel the heat. So you got to put the heat on them.
Let me play audio from the governor of Florida coming out strong in defense of reopening his state. Listen to the governor of Florida. Here we go.
Our data is available. Our data is transparent. In fact, Dr. Birx has talked multiple times about how Florida has the absolute best data. So any insinuation otherwise is just typical partisan narrative trying to be spun. And part of the reason is that because you got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened.
That's right.
Not only do we have a lower death rate, well, we have way lower deaths generally. We have a lower death rate than the Acela Corridor, D.C., everyone up there. We have a lower death rate than the Midwest, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. But even in our region, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida has the lower death rate. And I was the #1 landing spot from tens of thousands of people leaving the #1 hot zone in the world to come to my state. So we've succeeded, and I think that people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption, so they got to try to find a boogeyman. Maybe it's that there are black helicopters circling the Department of Health. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you.
Last question.
Oh,
That's
nice.
a guy with backbone right there,
Well,
man.
I love
They
that dude.
raked him over the coals when
Oh.
he wouldn't do a total shutdown. Raked him over the coals. Say, yo, you don't believe in science. You're one of those crazy right-wingers. I mean, he withstood all of that.
He's
and I
winning.
forget the lady that's the health commissioner there, but the two of them, I mean, they made fantastic decisions because they targeted the nursing homes. They went
There
where
it
the
is.
problem was.
Now, okay, so action item number 2. Again, action item number 1, you go to peaceablygather.com, register yourself, say, I pledge I'm going to church, and then encourage your pastor to go to
Yeah,
church.
take the link. Send that link to your pastor and the people in your church, definitely.
Absolutely. Now, action item number 2, go to constitutioncoach.com, sign up, register, become a coachable person so that on our podcast, we have millions of listeners, and my job is to present you with the facts and I always try to help you as a member of the Thrive Nation to identify your biggest limiting factor and to push past it. Well, normally we talk about, Google reviews and website updates and ads that work and no-brainers and accounting and performa and how to hire and fire good, hire good people, fire bad people, how to make workflows. Well, our biggest limiting factor for everybody out there in half the states is that you can't be open for business.
Yeah.
So this is a big thing. But if you go to constitutioncoach.com, Rick, what happens if they do fill out the form and they reach out to you? Are you going to send Governor Lightfoot to their home to force them to do things, or what happens?
It's super, super simple. So if you want, you can just jump on that page and watch some of the videos and just get educated about are quarantines constitutional. Government does have a role, and I hope people realize that. We're not saying government shouldn't do anything in a pandemic. It has a proper, limited role. So you can learn about that difference just watching a couple of videos. You can sign up to take a class, again, totally for free. And then what we're really looking for you to do, be willing to invest a couple of hours a week. That's what we're asking for. Be willing to invest a couple of hours a week so that you can study the Constitution at the same time you get other people to do it. That's what our volunteers do. As a Constitution host or coach, you actually host the class yourself. So you can take the class for the first time while you don't have to be an expert on any of this. We bring the expertise through the videos and the digital workbooks and all that.
Action item number 2, the Blaze recently reached out to me, Chad Prather specifically on the Chad Prather show from the Blaze. He reached out to me to have me on as a guest, and I was very fortunate that he was asking good questions.
I watched your interview, bro. You nailed it, man.
Well, he's a great interviewer, and I would encourage you to find that show. What you do is you go to YouTube and you search for, let me find the show here. You do a search for Chad Prather and Coronavirus Exposed, and just share that show with people. Yeah. Sharing that. Josh, why is it so important for people out there who believe in our constitutional rights to not remain silent?
Well, if we remain silent, then it's going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to perpetuate. So we have to stand up and say something about these things, or it's just going to keep going on and on and on, and it's just going to continue to get worse. It's not going to get better unless, and you can quote this much better than I, Rick, but the only way for evil to exist is for good men to do nothing. I think that's how it goes.
That's right, man.
So,
Evan Burke, you got it.
I mean, so it's just a matter of us actually standing up and saying something. You know this as well as I do, Clay, with other business owners, and not to shift the paradigm of the show or anything, but there's a lot of guys out there and gals out there who just flat out aren't doing well. I mean, let's just be real and honest that their businesses are shut down. They're going through severe issues. There's been some horrible things from some people we know and that are associated, and I won't jump into that, but this is real world, real people, real talk. Yeah. And if you take somebody's livelihood away and take the livelihood for Living Water, for instance, for 19 families, if you take that away, and we're so ridiculously fortunate, but it's real stuff.
That's right.
And these people playing with our government or playing with our society for whatever their agenda may be are destroying real family and real people. And that's why we have to take a stand and say something and do something.
Rick, one thing that's very interesting is today you can buy, if you want to buy, a copy of Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. You can do so, but you cannot buy a copy of my new book called Fear Unmasked. Can you please explain to me, from your perspective, what's wrong with the idea that you can buy Adolf Hitler's handbook on how to be a nefarious, terrible person, and why you can't buy a book that just tries to explain to you the facts related to the COVID-19 government overreach?
Well, because, Clay, you have common sense and logic, and you brought those into your book, so that would naturally not fit with what Amazon would want to push.
Why is that a bad precedent? Forget me.
Oh,
just
terrible.
saying in general, why is that a horrible thing when all of a sudden the government's determining what books can be published and which ones cannot be published?
Listen, censorship, and I know some of my constitutional friends are going to say, Rick, censorship only applies when government's actually doing that. But when you have government-supported and backed institutions like Facebook and YouTube and Amazon and all of these other giants that literally control. I mean, you know this better than I do on the book market. Amazon probably what is it, 60% or something of?
Oh, it's a massive number.
It's a massive number. So when you have a giant like that is literally blackballing you and censoring you from being able to get to that market and reach them, they're controlling the narrative. They're controlling what people believe, what they're exposed to, so you don't even get the chance for debate.
So if you're out there today, I would encourage you, go to thrivetimeshow.com, thrivetimeshow.com. And once you go up there, Andrew, I'll let you kind of zoom in on it. Once you go to thrivetimeshow.com, we have a button in the top left called COVID Chaos. And you click on there, and there you can download the book for free. You can download the audio book for free. It's all there. You can get it all for free. And I encourage you to go there today, download the book for free. You don't have to sign up for my newsletter list to get it. You just get it. I'd encourage you to get it, to get the knowledge, because once you know the knowledge, it's very hard for people to manipulate you. And the final thing I would encourage all the listeners to do, I would encourage all of the listeners today, I would encourage you to get the facts and then act. And you might say, well, Clay, how could I get the facts? Well, if you do go to thrivetimeshow.com, again, Andrew, if you show the listeners, and they go to the COVID Chaos button, I'm going to send you a link to a document, to a briefing that has everything we talked about on today's show cited. It's all linked, it's cited, it's vetted, everything we're going to tell you. So let me do an example. Let's say I'm going to search right now, Dr. Fauci, and Andrew, I'm going to put this on the screen here. Let's say Dr. Fauci funds Wuhan lab. You might say, I think I heard a buddy tell me that Dr. Fauci funded it. Well, is that anecdotal? Is that somebody making that up? Is that my opinion? Is that real? Well, you look right here, hidden in plain sight, Newsweek tracks it down and shows that Dr. Fauci did, in fact, pay for the funding of the controversial Wuhan lab. Wow. Now, Rick, I'm going to read this to you. It's kind of a little bit scary here. It says, in 2019, with the backing of the National Institute of Health, they committed $3.7 million over 6 years to research that included some gain-of-function research. Many scientists have criticized the gain-of-function research, which involves manipulating viruses in the lab to explore their potential for infecting humans because it creates a risk of starting a pandemic from accidental release. Rick, why does that all of a sudden change the narrative when you realize that the guy who's giving America advice on what we should be doing to protect ourselves from the coronavirus is the man who funded the creation of the COVID-19 virus? Why is that something we should all know?
Well, first of all, shocking, right?
Shocking.
And why do people not know this? Because, well, first of all, Major media is not going to cover it. Secondly, people are afraid to share this stuff. And all I could think about as you were given those list of action steps was don't stop with yourself when you go to all these different links. Share, share, share. Be a force multiplier. I'm so tired of Americans saying, oh, I don't like my freedoms being lost, but I can't do anything about it. There is a lot you can do about it. And when Josh was saying if you don't do this, it's going to continue, absolutely true. I got to say this about the action steps. This is Thomas Paine. All the way back to 1777, he said, those who expect to reap the benefits of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigues of supporting it, meaning like adults. In other words, grow up, step up, do your part, at least hit send, be a force multiplier. Our people are ignorant right now, and you can be part of the solution. You can't just sit here and listen and get riled up. You got to take these action steps, and that's how people will find out about what Fauci was involved in and find out about the truth of these numbers and start getting over the fear and start coming out of their homes and living again.
At the recent rally that you and I attended in Chicago, there at the Buckingham Fountain, the day before, you also spoke at a local church.
Yeah.
And the Chicago Sun-Times ran an article about them. I'm going to pull it up here so Andrew can see it here. It says, facing fines and threats of closure, churches continue to hold services. There's not going to be a stand down, is what the pastor said. They're not going to stop. And now the mayor of Chicago says they're going to go back, find everybody who was at the service, including me and you, and find us. And by the way, that's you right there look at that. That's a picture of you in the Chicago Sun-Times. There you are right there. Beautiful. No Photoshop needed.
Maybe there's
by the
no
way.
identifying features there, so they can't track me down. I don't know.
So they said they're going to fine everybody who was at the church service. Sir, why can't the people out there just stop attending church to avoid these fines? Why is that absolutely the last thing we should be doing?
If you care about any of your freedoms, this is the front lines. The churches, that is the battle. That is the place that we need to be fighting right now. We drove all night long to get to that church in Chicago to stand with Pastor Christian, to stand with those Romanians. They understand the value of freedom. They came from tyranny. They came from communism. And unfortunately, we Americans are just so spoiled. I mean, let's be blunt about it. We just are. We've been blessed with freedom for so many generations that most of us, did not have to fight for. I mean, here we are, the day after Memorial Day. We're supposed to be honoring those who came before us and paid such an incredible price, but we honor them by living out that freedom. And right now, the First Amendment, the first freedom in the First Amendment, that freedom of religion is the one that is in the news. It's the one that's the easiest for you to fight back on right now. And to not show up at church, I think, is giving in to having your freedom taken away. So we drove all night to be there and stand with Pastor Christian, willing to take the fine, willing to go to jail, whatever it was going to take. We're asking you to do the same thing with your church. If you don't stand for freedom now, I can't imagine when you would. I mean, if you don't see parents being hauled off to jail for playing t-ball with their kid in the park or being at the playground, pastors being arrested, when you see this stuff happening, if that's not enough to stir something inside you to make you want to stand for freedom, I don't know if you can say you love freedom at all.
I think a lot of people, Josh, don't want to stand up for freedom unless they lose theirs. So as an example,
Yes, sir.
I see a lot of business owners tell me, well, Clay, my industry is still essential.
Yes, sir.
Somebody asked me the other day, they said, why are you going to Chicago? And I said, I'm going to Chicago because it's the right thing to do. We got to stand up for our rights.
Right.
And then they said, are you getting paid to speak? And I said, absolutely not. I've actually, I'm helping pay for the hotel rooms of people who are going. I'm renting vehicles to get people from A to B. I'm helping to support the PR efforts. So I'm not making anything. They're like, yeah, but what do you get out of it? I said, well, my kids get their freedom.
Amen.
That's why I'm going. But there's a lot of people that kept telling me, why are you going? I mean, you're still essential, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
my whole thing is I feel just as much pain for the person who's not essential as myself. Can you, because you served in the military.
Yes, sir.
How do you process it when you know that your business is doing well in a time when other businesses are not doing well? Do you feel guilt? Do you feel sadness? Do you feel what how do you process that?
So I've actually had a number of discussions of this exact topic because the first emotion was guilt. The first emotion when I started to hear about other clients of yours, Clay, which have become friends of ours, and we have a good network, I guess, of people that we talk amongst ourselves about what's going on and how things are. And, and I talked to a few different guys, not going to mention names. I'll let them come on and mention their own names. And, we get to have some real talk and real conversation that men quite often don't do. But there was a lot of guilt about us being able to stay open when so many people weren't. There was a lot of me not wanting to celebrate our wins because of so many people couldn't even keep their staff, couldn't even continue to operate. But I think we have a responsibility. I think what you have done so well for so long, I mean, we've known each other for about 2.5 years now.
Yep.
And what I see day in, day out is your willingness to serve. Your willingness. Now, granted, you make money. Like, we're not going to argue that. We're not going to
Sure.
talk about all this. But
Yeah.
But your willingness to serve entrepreneurs, to serve people, to serve the community, to help people to improve their lives. So as a business owner who does have some wins, and we could go talk about those on a different show,
Yeah.
it's my responsibility to reach out for our brothers and sisters who are not doing well. It's our responsibility to serve the rest of our community and to serve those who are underprivileged. It's biblical principles, but it's just sheer moral values as well. But biblically, it states that we are supposed to give a hand up, not necessarily a handout, but there's so many things through the Gospels about just helping one another. And so if you choose to turn the other way and walk away from those in need, then that says a lot about who you are as a person. But we should help. You going to Chicago is definition of that. We missed our coaching today because you needed to do that, and I fully understand, and there was no objection on my behalf. But there's so many people, and yes, I did serve, but I was never in any wartime situations. I talked to some people yesterday, and I won't go through any tears or whatever, but there's so many people who have severe mental effects over what they've done for this country and for this freedom and for our flag, and the willingness to lay down your life for somebody else, and we so willingly lay down and let all of our rights be taken away.
Now, what I want to do is I want to play a little video clip here, Andrew, if you can look at it real quick. This is from WGN News. They covered the rally here. Let me hit play here.
Hey, Robin, good morning. The mayor's reopening plan prompted some protests over the weekend. The important piece is that it's delayed compared to the rest of the state. Many people are demanding the state reopen and are calling the stay-at-home order unconstitutional.
I'm here as an American patriot just like you.
Now, the reason why the people speaking at this rally had to use a megaphone is that the police came in and made us take down the big stage sound system that we had. So you have our speakers are on a megaphone.
A group gathered in Grant Park, waving flags and holding signs. They came together on Memorial Day to, quote, free fellow Americans from oppression. They say the shutdown has lasted long enough and want the state to reopen. USA! USA! Governor Pritzker could give the green light to move Illinois into phase 3 of reopening on Friday, but Mayor Lightfoot says the city is behind schedule. She's pushing Chicago's reopening to mid-June, possibly later. In response to the protest, Mayor Lightfoot tweeted, while we respect First Amendment rights, this gathering posed an unacceptable health risk and was dispersed.
Ridiculous.
No matter where in the city you live, no one is exempt from Governor Pritzker's stay-at-home order.
Mayor Lightfoot is holding a press
Now,
conference.
there's such bogusness there because, Rick, it says, although we respect your constitutional rights, although we respect your First Amendment rights, this health risk isn't acceptable. Then you're not respecting our rights.
Right, right.
I mean, so again, even though we have the data right here in front of us, and Andrew, you can zoom in on this to see here. I mean, this is not clayclark.com. Let me pull this up real quick. I mean, this is right here. This is on I grabbed the link from CNN today. The Center for Disease Control is showing right now, folks, that very few, we're talking about less than 0.4% of the people who get the coronavirus will die, that we know about, the people that actually get it and report it and go through the process. So if anybody wanted to quarantine themselves, I would suggest that the people who feel like they're at risk should be the ones who could choose to quarantine. They don't have to.
How am I respecting your rights when I'm taking your rights away?
Yeah, it's that sort of double speak that I'm talking about. It's like, well, although we respect your First Amendment rights to another example. Although let's say we're roommates, Rick, and where'd you go to college, by the way? Did you go to college?
Undergrad, Angelo State in West Texas, law school at the University of Texas.
Let's say we were at the University of Texas Law School, okay? And you had a roommate at the time, and I'm your roommate. You made some poor choices. You're stuck with me. And I said, Rick, although I respect your rights to eat the food that you have purchased in the refrigerator, I have eaten all of your food. What does that say?
It's an interesting definition of respect.
I mean, if you say, although, Josh, imagine this. Imagine that we are dear friends. We go out to dinner at a restaurant, and you order a nice steak. This used
mahogany.
To happen,
we go mahogany.
This used to happen all the time with the disc jockeys after the bridal shows.
Okay.
There's one guy on our team that used to do crazy stuff. Okay, he would do stuff where he was a guy where he was the one after the bridal shows, after the trade shows. He would always have the most drinks. You could challenge him to all the DJs would razz him and say, "Hey, I bet you can't have 8 Long Island iced teas in 5 minutes." And he's like, "Oh, I can." And he's just that guy. And he loved those kind of bets. And so one time he ordered himself an unbelievably nice steak meal. And he went up to use the restroom. When he came back, everybody had eaten his entire meal.
Yes.
But the guys
out of respect.
The guys kept saying, with all due respect, we want you to know that we did eat your meal. But we're not, we want you to know we respect you. We don't want you to feel as though we care enough about you to share. Mm-hmm. But whenever you throw out the phrase "with all due respect," does that give you, Josh, a hall pass? I mean, does it give the mayor of Chicago when she says, "Although we respect your First Amendment rights, we don't think this is safe"? Does that even make sense?
There's that big monologue. I think it was a sad Adam Sandler movie. I think when you say "with all due respect," you can say whatever you want afterwards. Yeah. So hey, Clay, with all due respect, really just not looking very good.
In Texas,
but it's not disrespectful because I already said
right.
with all due respect. Like I could say with all due respect, and I go up punch Rick in the face, and it's not disrespectful because I said with all due respect.
In Texas, you just say, "Well, bless your heart," and
then
you can say anything. No, it is well, the pastor at the Romanian church, that was part of what he said. He took greatest offense to the idea that they're saying we're doing this for your own good, that we love the people in your church more than you do, that we're trying to take care of them,
absolutely,
instead of having any faith in that pastor to take care of his own people.
The other thing I want to share from this, just listen to the lies as they begin on this coverage. Listen to the audio again one more time. This is WGN News. Listen to the lies. Here we go.
Hey, Robin, good morning. The mayor's reopening plan prompted some protests over the weekend. The important piece is that it's delayed compared to the rest of the state. Many people are demanding the state reopen and are calling the stay-at-home order unconstitutional.
Many are calling it unconstitutional.
Right.
But Rick, it just is unconstitutional.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and you notice they also did not mention at all that we were there to honor those who had paid the ultimate price for our freedom. They didn't talk about it at all.
No.
I mean, that was the main theme of the whole rally. And I forget the guy's name. It was Eric. I can't remember his last name. The one with the Texas cowboy hat, which I was really glad he was wearing. Our first speaker.
Yes, he had he earned a Purple Heart in the military.
Yeah, and he used Thomas Paine as well. And he used the quote about, "If trouble must come, let it come in my time, so that my children can live in peace." And that goes back to what you were saying, Josh, is that it's caring enough about the next generation to say, I will go stand up for this right now, rather than just saying, I'm okay, I'm essential, I've got my paycheck, so I'm not going to care about anybody else. That attitude that Thomas Paine really infused. I mean, we often hear Washington's sword and Paine's pen. That's what won the Revolutionary War. And it's very, very true. He infused that attitude of sacrifice through his writings to get people to get off the couch, if you will, if we're using our vernacular, and get in the fight.
Rick, again, your website is constitutioncoach.com. Am I correct? Constitutioncoach.com.
Yes, sir.
Everybody go there today. Check it out. Learn more. Take action. Do not just listen to this information passively. The time to take action is now. And now, without any further ado, we'll end this show with a boom. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom!
There have always been people who don't believe. They don't believe in hard work. They don't believe in responsibility. Ultimately, they don't believe in themselves. They believe in shortcuts, in luck. They believe that outside circumstances control who succeeds and who doesn't. It's just the luck of the draw. But you are not one of these people. You believe that no matter what your circumstances tell you, success is still possible. And you accept this responsibility because you want to achieve something great. You're hungry for it. You chase it from the moment your eyes open in the early morning. You chase it into all hours of the night when others have given up, when others have said that it couldn't be done. You've kept pushing because you believe that success is not a game of chance. Success is a choice that you make every single day. That's what you believe.
Discover the world's most affordable and effective business school today at thrivetimeshow.com.